Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Christ unser Herr zum Jordan kam, which translates to Christ our Lord came to the Jordan. Pardon the typo, I already printed it out and I'd rather not waste paper having to print out another copy. We've looked at one harmonization of this melody in the past, in one of our past episodes, because I was organizing these and not in any particular order before, and that was associated with BWV 280. But this is BWV 7. This is a very interesting chorale, lots of modal influence, definitely free-flowing relationships between major and minor. I do choose to look at this chorale through a tonal context because I do believe it is mostly tonal, but there are some non-normal chord progressions in here, definitely some unusual ones. So let's hop into the analysis. So we have two sharps in the key signature. We start on E minor and we end on B major. I think the chorale overall is in the key of B minor, but I think we start in the key of E minor, at least just for a bit, for the first couple of measures. It's just what it sounds like to me. The first thing we hear in the chorale is just an ascending E minor scale, and he harmonizes it in such a way. So we're in E minor, G major territory. We'll go ahead and say we're in the key of E minor, starting off on an E minor triad, as we do in the key of E minor. We then have E, B, E, and G, just a rotation of that exact same triad. And here's our first sort of modal injection. We have D, D, F sharp, and A. We get a flat 7 chord, which is not unprecedented in tonal music by any means, but sometimes we might refer to this as a 5 of 3, depending on how you look at it. So I learned analysis when I first learned analysis. I was told by the instructor to stay away from labeling flat 7 chords the way they occur in the music and to refer to them as a secondary dominant. So I'll offer both analyses depending on what you might be familiar with. I'm totally okay using flat 7 chords, though they pop up with some frequency. But they do more often than not go to 3 or 1, which are chords that are analogous. And then we have G, D, G, and B, which in the key of E minor is 3. So they both go to where you expect them to go. 7 wants to go to 3 via the cycle of fifths. 5 of 3 wants to resolve to its tonic chord. And then we have D, D, F sharp, and A again, and this is kind of unusual. It's kind of like we have a little fragment here that's in the key of G major almost, because we have like a 5-1-5 in the key of G major, but I still say that we're in the key of E minor here. But anywho, we have another D major chord. We can call that 7. I'm going to say that this is our modulation point right here to B minor, and we're going to go ahead and call this 3 in the key of B minor. It's kind of an unusual progression, but this is where the melody starts to sound like it's going to B minor or the realm of D major for me. And like I said, this is a very modally influenced chorale, so some of the progressions are not going to fit 100% within the lines that we expect harmony to function in common practice period tonal harmony. So take the analysis with a grain of salt. I'm just doing Roman numeral analysis for the vertical consonances, or just the vertical sonorities. We then have C sharp, E, F sharp, and A. We kind of have like a passing 2 chord, but I don't really think that that's super, it's not really contributing to the progression at all. But after this 3 chord, we get B minor, B, F sharp, B, and D. It's our tonic triad. Then he leaps up to G here, so we get G, D, B, and B. And we could say that there's a passing 6 chord there, which does want to go to 2, which is the next chord, right? E, G, A sharp, and C sharp, or sorry, apologies. C sharp, G, B, and C sharp. So we have, did I say this was C sharp? E, G, B, and C sharp. That's a 2-6-5 chord. We know that Bach loves his 2-6-5 chords. C sharp, minor 7 flat 5 over E. And because this is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor, we're expecting a 5 chord, and we do get it on the and of beat 2, F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, which is our passing 5 chord before we cadence on 1, B minor, B, D, F sharp, and B. Perfect authentic cadence. So I guess it's possible for us to say that we have a 6 chord happening here. That's fine. We expect 6 to precede 2 anyways, so that's fine. Okay, so now moving ahead, we have an interesting juxtaposition here. We have A natural and A sharp. I had a commenter comment on one of my videos asking about their take on the analysis, and they totally caught me making a mistake in one of my previous videos where I had a 5 chord on the cadence. It was a half cadence, and then the minor version of the major 5 chord, the cadence ended on, followed it. So I naturally just called it a restatement of the previous chord. But notice here we have a respelling of the F sharp triad, but the A sharp is turned into an F sharp, and then we get A natural here. So here we have an F sharp minor triad, not an F sharp major triad like we had in the previous phrase. So I wanted to pay extra attention to that. So this is definitely a minor 5 chord. It does not sound like we're in the key of E minor yet, even though that our next cadence ends on E minor, or it's a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E minor. It still doesn't sound like that. This is definitely a minor 5. And the fact that it goes immediately to B minor again is very interesting as well. It's like 5-1. It does exactly like you would expect the chord. It functions exactly the way you would expect the chord progression to function, but we don't get the leading tone. We get almost sounding like he's projecting B minor onto a D major phrase, right? We have the 5 going to 1 in sort of a D major context here, and a descending scale where he then warps it into E minor. It's pretty unusual, but very interesting how he goes about doing it. But regardless, we have a 1 chord here, B minor, and then we have A, C sharp, G. Oh, sorry, and I forgot to mark this. G is a non-chord tone. G and C sharp. That is, this G is another accented non-chord tone, or it's another non-chord tone. In this case, it's non-accented. This pattern you see in Bach from time to time where he'll anticipate, kind of like a false anticipation with non-chord tones, and he'll keep it in the voice, which is kind of interesting. A, C sharp, F sharp, and C sharp. That's an F sharp minor triad again, so it's 1-5-1-5, but with minor 5s, which is really interesting. You could say that this was in the key of D major and say that this is 3 going to 6 going to 3, which would be much more of it would be a more normal progression, I would say, because it would look more like the chords were going where they were supposed to. But really, I do think because I'm forcing this B minor perspective onto it, I don't think we've quite modulated to the key of D major, especially with the absence of D major throughout. Just another take. We have G, D sharp, F sharp, and B. That would be like a 3 augmented chord because we have this leading tone in here, but I think really what's going on is this D sharp and this F sharp are non-chord tones, and it's kind of like a little bit of a 7 in the inner voices going on, tonicizing the tonic, right? We actually have G, E, and B, which is an E minor chord in first inversion, so that's 4-6, and I think that this is our pivot chord. It's now our tonic in the key of E minor. So next we have F sharp, A, E, and A, and again I think this is an accented non-chord tone like beat 2. It's actually D sharp, F sharp, A, F sharp, and A, which is a D sharp diminished triad in first inversion, which would be 7-6. And now we're getting ready for our cadence. So now we get E, B, E, and G. our tonic triad E minor in root position. Then we have B, D sharp, F sharp, and B. It's a 5 chord with a delayed 7th in the tenor. And then we cadence on E minor again in root position. So all in all, he's moving and flowing between E minor and B minor pretty freely. And he's also hinting at the idea of like D major and G major as well, with the kind of harmonizing freely with the contour of the melody. It's like if the melody sounds like G major, he hints at G major, but he doesn't quite go to the full extent of modulating, in my opinion, which is very indicative of modal music. Modal music doesn't have the same relationship between the tonic and the dominant that tonal music has. They'll use it near cadences to bring attention towards the end of the phrase, or to establish like a punctuation at the end of the phrase. But throughout the phrase, they really just care about consonances and harmonizing the intervals between the lines. And I think that Bach is definitely nearing that side of the spectrum, and deviating further away from the tonal conventions that are popularized during his time. But that being said, let's go ahead to the next phrase, which is a very beautiful phrase. It's probably my favorite phrase in the whole chorale. I analyzed it as a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B, so we'll see what happens also, because he kind of multi-purposes it. So we're looking for a modulation point, and I'm inclined to think that we are in the key of B minor throughout, even though we have A naturals. That hasn't stopped us from being in B minor in the past. So we're going to go ahead and say that we've modulated here, and this E minor triad is actually 4 in the key of B minor. He used 4 to modulate to E minor in the past. Now he's using 4 as the common chord to get back to B minor. And then we have C sharp, A, E, and A, another 7 chord. That's interesting. 4 wants to go to 7. More specifically, it's 7-6. Some people might call this 5-6 of 3 for the reasons I mentioned earlier. We have some neighbor tones in the alto and the bass. And then we have C sharp, A, E, and A. It's just the same chord again. No need to reanalyze. And then we have the passing 7th in the soprano, and thirds leaping down in the alto and the bass. They're mimicking one another. Before we go to D major, D, A, D, and F sharp. So 7 does go to 3, or 5 of 3 goes to 3, as we expect. And we're starting to see why I think we're in the key of B minor here, because we're starting to see the sequence 4, 7, 3, and the sequence actually pans out the entire way. G, G, D, and B. That is a G major triad in root position, which is a 6 chord, which is where 3 wants to go. Passing 7th in the bass. We then get E, G, C sharp, and B. 6 wants to go to 2, and this is in fact a 2 half diminished 6-5. C sharp minor 7 flat 5 over E. And then we get F sharp, C, and A sharp, our dominant triad in root position. So we have the sequence pretty much fully realized. We have E 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, and then it's a perfect authentic cadence where we get actually a major cadence. We get B major here. He uses the Picardy third in the middle of the chorale, which is unusual. This isn't unprecedented. We've seen this in a chorale or two in the past, so it's not unheard of, but definitely not the norm. But if we look ahead to the next phrase, or rather if we look ahead to the next chord, we have E minor afterwards, and when we turn the tonic triad in a minor key to a major chord, that's another way of also implying that it's functioning as a secondary dominant. So this one chord is also 5 of 4, and it's not uppercase 4, it's lowercase 4, because we expect it to be minor in a minor key, and it is. E, G, E, and B. E minor triad, that's a 4 chord. Okay, so now we have some passing tones in the lower voices, F sharp, A, E, and B. It's not really analyzable using Bach's vocabulary, so we'll move ahead. Then we have G, B, E, and That is an E minor triad in first inversion, so we don't need to reanalyze, just need to change the figured bass, passing tone in the alto, connecting the 4 and the 6, and then we have A, C sharp, G, and E, and that would be an A7 chord in root position, which would be 7-7, which is where 4 wants to go, right? One might even call this 5-7 of 3, as I've mentioned before. Then we have D, C, F sharp, and F sharp, which is a D7 chord, or sorry, a D C sharp, apologies. So that would be a 3-7 chord in root position, and it's incomplete because we're missing the 5th of the chord, but for 7 chords, the most likely tone to be emitted is the 5th, because that's the one tone that doesn't really contribute much context to the chord. But 7's still going to 3 as you would expect, and then we have G, B, B, and D, our 6 chord. So we see the sequence unfurling again. 1 going to 4, going to 7, going to 3, going to 6. We have some passing tones as well. F sharp, B, A, and D. There's kind of a passing 7 chord, a 1-7 chord here, but I don't really think it's contributing too much to the progression, so I'll just mention it instead of writing it on the page. Let's see where it goes next. We would expect this to go to 2, but it doesn't. It goes to E minor, E, B, G, and E, which is a 4 chord in root position. So a substitute for 2, but not quite a 2 chord. We have some passing tones in the upper voices, and then we have F sharp, E, C sharp, and A. This is a 5-7 chord, F sharp major, sorry, I said the same thing twice, F sharp 7 with a 4-3 suspension in the tenor. And then we cadence on 1, of course. It's a perfect authentic cadence. I know it's getting a little scrunched here, apologies. It's the chorale wanted to expand formatting wise. Alright, looking ahead, we have a half cadence. Notice how we're seeing another B major triad here, but it's being contextualized here as the dominant of E minor with the C naturals and the D sharps. So here we have F sharp, A, F sharp, and C. Notice the A sharp is held over this time, so we're not immediately moving over to the key of E minor like we did in the previous phrase where we moved from E minor to B minor. No, we carry B minor as an idea for a little bit at least. I imagine it's going to happen in and around this C natural right here. This A natural could hint at things too, but it's not really. It's this C natural that's going to start implying things. Okay, so we have F sharp major again, which is a root position 5 chord. Then we have B, B, F sharp, and D, another tonic triad in root position, B minor, passing 7th in the tenor. Then we have E, G, E, and C sharp. That's interesting. That is a 2 chord that we're getting in the middle of the chorale. Usually this is a cadential chord and we expect it to go to 5, but instead, actually, it kind of does go to 5. We have F sharp in the bass, A in the tenor, that's the makings of a 5 chord, but minor rather than major. And then we have E and we have C sharp. I think it's possible to say that we have a passing 5-7 chord there, and that would make sense because 2 is going where we expect it to. Except it's going to a minor version of the chord, which is what's unusual. We then have G, B, D, and B, and that is a G major triad in root position, which would be a 6 chord. So we have kind of a deceptive progression here. We expect 5 to go to 1, even minor 5. We would expect minor 5 to go to 1 as well, but here it's going to 6, so it's deceiving us. I do think, however, this is where we modulate, so we'll go ahead and call this our E minor pivot point, and we'll call this G major triad 3 in the key of E minor. We then get C sharp, E, G, and B, And it is possible, it's actually very possible that we could call that 2 as well, in the key of B minor, and we could say that the modulation happens later, maybe around this F sharp minor chord, but we would expect an F sharp diminished chord instead. Here we get D. Maybe that is the case actually. Maybe we'll say the modulation happens here. I've changed my mind. We have some passing tones here, and then 6 goes to a passing 2, 4, 3 chord here, and then we get F sharp, D, F sharp, and A. That is our D major triad in in first inversion. In the key of B minor, that's 3. In the key of E minor, that's 7. And it's not uncommon, I say it's not uncommon, it's relatively uncommon for Bach to modulate through a flat 7 chord, but I've seen it before, at least I've analyzed it that way, and I think it's definitely a possibility, but with the C sharp here and the C natural here, I think it's more likely that we've modulated on this beat because the C sharp going into the key of E minor with the D natural afterwards is less likely, even though this chorale is highly modally influenced. There's some Dorian action going on. There'll definitely be some big Dorian action in the last phrase as well. So it's not another way of analyzing it, so long as you stay consistent. I just convinced myself otherwise because the analysis just looks better to me on the page. So here we have E, C, F sharp, and A, and that right there is a passing 2 chord in third inversion. And this is also this is in first inversion as well. 7 wanted to go to anywhere other than 1 or 3 is kind of odd, but I will put this passing 2 chord there because of what comes afterwards. Here we get this would be 2, 4, 2, but afterwards we get D sharp, B, F sharp, and B, which is a B major triad in first inversion. That would be 5, 6, which is exactly why the 2, 4, 2 chord is preceding it. We would expect 2 to precede 5. Even though we have this D major here, he's kind of flirting with this idea of all of these possible pitch centers coinciding with one another. It's like we have the idea of E minor and G major coexisting, and B minor and D major coexisting. It's interesting that they can all mesh together while also retaining some type of tonal normal progression. We have a passing 7th in the melody, and then we have E minor, our tonic triad, E, B, E, and G. And then we cadence on B major, just a 5 chord, root position. This is our half cadence. So we've seen B major used as a perfect authentic cadence, and we've seen it used in a half cadence. And we're going to see it used in a perfect authentic cadence again at the end of the chorale. So we're still in the key of E minor, and we get a perfect authentic cadence at the end of the next phrase. So let's just keep analyzing in E minor then. We have E, G, B, and E, which is our E minor triad and root position. We have some passing tones in the outer voices. We then get C natural, G, E, and G. That's a C major chord in root position, so that would just be 6, passing 7th in the bass. We then get A, C natural, E, and A, which would be a 4 chord in the key of E minor. Then we have a passing tone in the alto. Sorry, I was drawing a blank there with what the alto was called. If we were in the key of G major here, this would be kind of interesting because this A minor would be 2, and this F sharp would imply that instead of this actually being 2, it was a passing 7-6 chord. And instead, which is how I would analyze it, we have a C major chord, which would be 4, 7 going to 1, right? C being 4 in the key of G, F sharp diminished being 7, and this being 1. So maybe one might even call this 7/6 of 3 for that exact same reason, depending on how you look at it. But because we're in the key of E minor, I think it's a little less likely, but I could see the argument being made that this is another way to analyze the chord. But we are going to G major, G, D, G, and B. That's a 3 chord. A little bit of a deceptive progression because we expect 4 to go to 5 or to 7, but this is just a substitute for either of those chords. And this is where the chord progression starts to get kind of wonky. We have A, C sharp, F sharp, and A. And we're very clearly in the key of E minor here. So the fact that we get an F sharp minor triad is very interesting. So this is definitely F sharp minor. That would be 2/6. And then we get some passing tones. We get B, we get D sharp, and we get G and F all at the same time. And that would be a 3 chord that's augmented in first inversion. It's a 7 chord, so it'd be 3 + 6, 5. And that's really just a passing chord that we're seeing in between the 2 and what comes afterwards, because we really just are connecting C sharp to E using melodic minor in the tenor, and then A to C in the bass. So there's this interesting pattern going on, but we do have kind of a sequential, kind of like a parallel harmony going on, because afterwards we have C, E, E, and A, which is A minor in first inversion, A minor over C, which would be 4/6, passing 7th on the melody, and then we have the A here in the bass, which kind of turns it into root position, but it gets rid of the 1/3 of the chord, so it doesn't make it as strong of a vertical tertian harmony. So see how we have 2, 3, and 4. That's not uncommon in Bach's music to see these numerically adjacent harmonies. They're not parallel in the way that they're spelled, but there is parallel qualities to them. But then we get B, B, D sharp, and F sharp, which is our root position tonic triad. And then we get E, G, B, and E, which is our tonic triad and root position. So it's a normal cadence with some very flavorful chords beforehand. Definitely a byproduct of this mixture of modal and tonal worlds, which is really interesting. I think that's super cool that Bach was, Bach had a time where he was composing transitionally, and I think that's awesome. The fact that he was aware of composition in older styles and didn't shy away from writing that way, I think is really awesome. And it's cool when his music has modal influence in it. Not that this is really a complete byproduct of modal influence, but at the same time, it's injected all throughout the chorale. So the fact that these two worlds are mixing, it's really interesting. Okay, so moving into the last cadence, it's another perfect authentic cadence, but we're in the key of B minor. And I think we straight away modulate to the key of B minor, use E minor as a pivot chord again, just like at the beginning of the B section. And then we have immediately afterwards, which is really interesting, we have a juxtaposition of E minor and E major. Just very similarly to how we were in the key of E minor or B minor here, and we got F sharp major and F sharp minor. So the fact that they can coexist together is really interesting. So if we were analyzing purely in the key of B minor, this would be a 4 chord. So E major, which is a byproduct of melodic minor or Dorian, depending on how you look at it, because Dorian has the raised 6th and melodic minor has the raised 6th. But I'm inclined to say Dorian because we have A major immediately afterwards. So we have 4 going to 7, a very modal early music sound. 4 going to 7, major going to major is super interesting. And the fact that theme continues throughout, it's like we have a little departure to A major here, right? Because this is just a 5 going to 1 in the key of A major, which would be taking us further away from the key of B minor. And it would be a more distant relationship from the key of E minor, which is 1 sharp in the key signature, because A major has 3 sharps in the key signature, so it wouldn't be the smoothest progression. In fact, in order to do that, to establish that relationship, he had to juxtapose E minor and E major next to one another, which is not a very smooth relationship, right? We have cross relations. We have the tenor singing G in the previous cadence and the alto singing G sharp. So it's an interesting progression between the two. But I think we're in the key of B minor here, even though we get a little bit of tonicization of 7. One might even call this 5 of 7. I know that seems kind of weird, tonicizing the flat 7, but who knows? It's kind of the sound that he evokes here. And then we get F sharp, C sharp, A, and E. That would be an F sharp minor triad, depending on how you look at it. You could call this an F sharp minor 7 triad. You could say that this E is also the chord tone and just say that this is a 6/4 chord. But the F sharp minor triad would be 5. It would be minor 5/7 in the key of, actually, let's see, D, A, and F. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and say this F is an accented non-chord tone, or this F sharp rather, and this is actually just 6/4. And this is just a passing 6/4. You might hear this as a lowercase 5/7 chord. I mean, we have a very modal sound preceding it. And that this was some sort of like a deceptive progression, as we would expect it to go to 3 or to 1. But I don't know. I'm going to call it a passing 6/4, especially because D major comes afterwards, right? D, D, A, and F sharp, and 7 ultimately does want to go to 3. So we also get a passing 7th in the tenor. All in all, I think this is a more succinct analysis rather than calling this 5/7. But if you stopped the needle, or if you paused the record and sustained this chord while redacting everything else, that would be a 5/7 chord, and a minor 5/7 chord at that, or a 6 chord in the key of A major, depending on how you look at it. And then we can, if we were to analyze this in A major, which this kind of sounds like it is, but I'm treating it all in B minor because I know what's anticipated in the next cadence, and also because of the fact that this has been a very modally influenced chorale up until this point, so it's very likely that this is just B Dorian, which is the same as A major actually, so yeah. Okay, moving ahead, we have E, B, and then G natural and E, so 3 going to 4. Then we have some passing tones, or one passing tone, a neighbor tone, and kind of like a, I don't know, just another non-chord tone, escape tone, I think is what they're called. Here we have F sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and E, which is a passing F sharp 7 chord without the 5th. This isn't the first time we've seen it. So we have this idea of parallelism again, 3, 4, and 5, the adjacent, or I say parallelism, what I mean is, well, they are parallel to one another, but they're not parallel in their structure. They're adjacent to one another numerically, so 3, 4, and 5. And then we get G, B, D, B, and D, right? Which is, depending on how you look at the chord, you could call it a 4, 6, 5 chord, depending on how you look at this G, but I think it's a 6 chord. We're going to call it a 6. Actually, that would complete the idea. I am going to call it a 4/7 chord actually, because we have because we leap down to E here. Actually, maybe I'll meet somewhere in the middle. We definitely have a G major triad here, G, B, B, and D. But when we get here, we have this E right here, which turns it into a 4/7 chord before going to B major, F sharp major, F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, which is our 5 chord, passing 7th in the tenor before we cadence on 1 major, B, D sharp, F sharp, and B. So yeah, I think we have a little bit of, by sustaining the 3 voices, the 3 upper voices over the E as well, it turns the chord into like a E minor 7 from a G major triad. That was a super interesting analysis. I had a lot to say. There were a lot of very unusual chord progressions here. Sometimes the harmonic rhythm was very difficult to pick out choosing what to put on the page and choosing what just to mention was somewhat difficult in certain cases as well. But yeah, when you get these chorales that have modal influence, it really challenges me to force a perspective onto them. Bach was definitely aware of the music that preceded him, and had a very interesting relationship with tonal harmony because of it. I think as time went on, the conventions and the harmonic practices of the time really crystallized to what they would be moving forward for the next hundreds of years. But Bach and these works that have modal influence they're just very, very fascinating to analyze, and I really enjoy looking at them. But it's also great to look at the sort of the hallmark of the Baroque period, this falling fifth sequence, and the fact that it happens twice in sequence coincidentally is really interesting as well. And yeah, just the freedom that he had between E and G and B and D, and even going to A over here is really interesting as well. There are lots of quirks and turns and interesting tidbits about this chorale that I hope you enjoyed as well. Let me know if you have any comments on the analysis. I think that all in all it's pretty strong. My heart races a little bit when I see minor fives. I'm just not used to seeing them, and I'm not sure if really there's more an appropriate way to analyze them that's more, I don't know, scholarly or conventional by any means. But minor fives, they pop up. It's a somewhat modal chorale, and that's where you'll see them. So yeah, that's all I have to say for today. Thank you so much for watching the channel, and thank you so much for continuing to support me by watching my videos. It means the world to me. I have tons of analysis to do in the future, so I hope you stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you take care.